Morning, depending upon where you are. This is Gary Bridgens from the Nuclear Matters team. We're going to go ahead and get started here with the 2019 Women in Nuclear June Outreach webinar on the topic of advocating for nuclear power. We're very excited that everyone is able to join today to talk about this very important topic and some actions that you can take to ensure the future of nuclear power in America. Now, before we get started and I pass it over to our presenters, I just want to cover a few logistical details. First, please note that everyone on the call will be muted until the Q&A session at the end of the call. So if you're trying to speak up and no one can hear you, that would be why. If you are interested in submitting questions, which we strongly encourage you to do,
I got it.
hello, is everyone able to hear me now? Sorry, I think that there was some drop off there. Great, okay. Excellent. So please do feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. Questions can be submitted through the online function. So if you're on the Zoom presentation right now, at the bottom of the page, there is a chat button. If you click on chat, a bar will pop up on the right side of your screen. At the bottom, there's a little drop-down menu of names. Please send your questions directly to me, as I'll be moderating the question and answer period at the end of the presentation. My name is Gary Bridgens, it's spelled G-A-R-Y, and I'll be recording our questions throughout the duration of the presentation, so send them as you think of them. And again, we're really excited to hear from our presenters today, so thanks again for joining and for your engagement with questions. One other just note to keep in mind is we will be recording this session, so any thoughts that you might miss, or if you have colleagues who are interested, we will be able to share a recorded version of the presentation. So with that, again, thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it over to Katie Saltzgiver from WIN for introduction of our speakers. Over to you, Katie.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID.
Hey, Katie, I think you're muted right now.
Sorry about that. Let me start back with introducing our speakers. First up, we have Kristen Zaitz, along with Heather Madison. Kristen founded the grassroots organization Mothers for Nuclear because she believed in supporting all clean energy sources to address major humanitarian and environmental issues. Kristen also served as president of NEYGN and as a chapter board member of US WIN. She's currently an engineering manager at Diablo Canyon. Our second speaker, Christine Sismadia, unfortunately couldn't join us today after being selected for jury duty, but Christine is the Director of State Governmental Affairs and Advocacy at NEI and manages NEI's advocacy branch, Nuclear Matters. Our third speaker, Linda Barnhart, offered to present Christine's piece as well as her own today. Linda leads industry mobilization efforts for Nuclear Matters. a grassroots coalition working to educate the public and policymakers about the benefits of nuclear energy. She's an associate director at APCO Worldwide, providing strategic counsel and communication support for our clients. Our final speaker is Christina Ham. Christina is the leading group member of the U.S. Wind DC chapter and has been supporting the domestic commercial nuclear industry as an engineer at NPR Associates for 6 years. Christina has been a longtime proponent of nuclear power, and her most recent advocacy effort was attending a town hall meeting with Congressman Dodd Beyer. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kristen Zates.
Hi, everyone. Can someone tell me if you can hear me?
We can hear you, Kristen.
Okay, let's get going. All right, now you should be seeing my screen, and I'll try to put it in slideshow view. See how fancy I can get. Okay, here we go. Thanks everyone for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure to talk with US Wind about advocacy. I believe that this is a group who not only has a demonstrated passion for the topic, but also a huge opportunity to make strides in the advocacy space. I was asked to speak today on how Heather and I started a successful grassroots campaign. I thought, that's so nice, successful. So I'll talk to you a little bit today about how we got started, who we are, what we're doing, and what we've learned. And the takeaway I want to leave with you all is I want you to feel empowered to do more advocacy and also to boost the effectiveness of any advocacy that you are doing. So who are we? I'm Kristen Zates. I am in California. I've been at Diablo Canyon for a number of years now. I don't know if I want to admit how many, but I think it's north of 15 somewhere. Heather and I met each other when we were first starting our careers at Diablo Canyon. She was in operations and I was in engineering, so our paths didn't cross very often when we were at work. But our friendship sprouted when we kept on seeing each other at similar type events in the local community. These were usually environmental service events like trail restoration or native species monitoring or volunteer work with our local state park. And through that, we learned that we shared similar environmental values. I put a few pictures on the slide of my childhood and then me and the kids and my husband outdoors. The outdoors is where I prefer to be. And I've always considered myself an environmentalist. Not always, though, have I considered myself a nuclear energy supporter. So after I started at Diablo Canyon and met Heather, it was over the same time I was slowly changing my mind about nuclear energy. And when I started as an intern, I thought, okay, I'm going to go work at this place and figure out what's really going on, this mysterious nuclear power plant. And then I'll leave and I'm going to start my real career after that. But as the years went by, I learned more and more about nuclear energy, and I learned how the carbon-free electricity generation and both that and the small land footprint were in line with my deeply held environmental values. And I ended up keeping the job and loving it. So how did we start a successful grassroots campaign? Somewhere at the beginning of 2016, our senior leaders at Diablo Canyon started having all-employee meetings to discuss what they called challenges on the horizon for nuclear power in California. And a lot of the employees, myself included, were suspicious. Like, why are we talking about challenges instead of talking about license renewal? Why are you talking with us about how difficult things are? Why not just put the right people on the task to address those challenges? So the mood at the plant was a really strange time for all of us. And I know a lot of you out there have gone through or are going through similar times of uncertainty at your station. When this was happening, Heather and I helped host an offsite meeting for employees to get together and discuss these rumors and talk about what we should do, if anything. And the picture I put on the slide on the right-hand side, that's our first all-employee meeting. offsite. When this meeting ended, I remember, cleaning up the room and restacking chairs and just having this feeling of dread. And Heather and I were the last two ones there. So we looked at each other and kind of made this agreement that we were gonna try to do something to keep Diablo Canyon open. And we talked about it and some more and decided, okay, how we're gonna do that is to organize an advocacy effort. We got not more than a few weeks into this effort when we realized the scale of the challenge. It wasn't just Diablo Canyon that was under threat. It was, nuclear power in our state. San Onofre had already closed, and our state's pretty anti-nuclear. And it's not just California, it's the entire United States. And wait, it's not just the entire United States, it's the world. Existing nuclear plants around the world are under threat of premature closure, and we're not building a bunch of new nuclear plants to keep up. So nuclear power just in general needed a big advocacy push. This resonated with me as something, I needed to act on, because when existing nuclear plants close, they're almost always replaced with fossil fuels. And so this struck me in my environmental values, in a deep way. I thought also, isn't someone else smarter and more talented than me going to be doing this? And the answer is, well, yes, probably, but that's not enough. Heather and I were needed, and just like you, and your voices are needed too. So as our eyes opened to the size of the problem, we expanded our focus. We moved from just Save Diablo Canyon. You could see pictures of a couple rallies and employee meetings there. And we expanded to nuclear in general. And like I said, we were nervous to start doing advocacy since neither of us have any formal communications training besides our obligatory general ed that we got in college. And, engineering programs aren't very famous for training good communicators. But after observing, the existing advocacy attempts, we knew that the advocacy community needed more voices. It was difficult when we started out to figure out what we wanted to focus on and where we could make a difference. If your problem statement is solve or keep nuclear plants open, that's pretty big, right? Where do you focus? And I am certainly not a politician or a policy person, but the more advocacy I do, I feel okay with who I am, and just feeling confident that I don't need to be a policy person to make a difference. It may be policy that saves nuclear in California and elsewhere, but I don't need to be a policy person myself to make a difference here. We can all be influencers. And I put this pyramid on the slide to show that public support for nuclear energy is the foundation. It's the supportive groundwork for political support of nuclear, for policy support of nuclear, and then all leading into saving existing nuclear plants, building more nuclear, and rolling out advanced nuclear. So influencing public opinion, it's more than just screaming into the void, of the internet or whatever your outlet might be. It's building partnerships with people and learning from everyone that you have dialogue with. I've learned from other advocacy groups and learned from their successes, their failures, my successes, my failures, etc. But we keep working and keep trying to move the needle. A few trusted friends helped us work through the beginnings of Mothers for Nuclear. It was an uncomfortable time, personally evaluating if I wanted to put my face, my family, and my opinions out in the public sphere for the onslaught of reactions from people, negative and positive. But we ended up going for it because staying safe and not doing it would mean we were having no impact. And Heather and I both agreed the issue was too important to not at least try. The name of the group was also something important to us. At first, we started by debating, should we be Mothers for Sustainability or Mothers for Climate Action or something like that, but they just didn't have the same ring. And we didn't want to hide our support of nuclear as we'd seen a lot of other groups before us do. So we launched a website and told our personal stories about why we changed our minds about nuclear, along with pictures. And you can check it out at mothersfornuclear.org. And we launched on Earth Day 2016. So what are we doing? We're communicating the environmental and humanitarian case for nuclear energy in a personal way using a variety of mediums. And I would love to talk with this group about all of the individual things we've done. I've listed a few out on the slide, like website, launching the website. We blog there, and we've shared our own personal stories and personal stories of other mothers and not mothers. Like, secret here, you don't need to be a mother to be part of Mothers for Nuclear. We have men, single women, etc. We have an active Facebook and Twitter. We've also done video, radio, etc. There's a picture of Heather and I with the cool, they look like ear muffs, but we're on local radio there. And I have so many, fun stories and lessons learned from these experiences. So if anyone wants to talk more about something in particular and share lessons learned or tips on different forms of advocacy, just shoot me an email, Kristen@mothersfornuclear.org. Love to talk with you. But in general, I'll say what we've learned is that people don't listen or care about an issue just because you care about it. And they certainly aren't going to take action on something just because you think it's important. So we didn't go out there and lead with nuclear is important, I care about it, I care about it. Our approach is to talk about our stories and talk about our values. We find shared values with others and find things that they care about, and then we talk to them about those things. And this is what is so neat about this group of women in nuclear, and the opportunity we have in front of us to make connections with people, because we all have different circles, different areas of influence, and people in our circles, I would bet that we share some values with the people that we keep in our circles. And you have a unique opportunity to talk to those people about things that you both care about. So what is it? Is it kids' health? Is it climate? Is it land conservation? The local economy? Start there. Start with something you both care about. There's a way to talk about nuclear in a positive light in a lot of different contexts. And Heather and I obviously like to talk about environmental issues, but that's not the only way that you can do advocacy. So the communication policy I was taught when I was just starting out working in nuclear was just to not talk about it, right? It was to stay silent and hope that other people don't talk about it. And when the nuclear industry, did get in the media or put someone on a podium, the message was delivered by an expert. And this was usually a seasoned white male in a suit. This is the very picture of the messenger that our target audience at Mothers for Nuclear is typically skeptical of. I know that's the audience I'm usually skeptical of. So the message that was being sent was any variation of trust us. Nuclear might be too sciencey for you to understand, so let us simplify it so you can understand it better. Or if you were smart enough to understand nuclear, then you would like it. I'll show you a survey about how when people know more about nuclear, they support it, implying that you don't support it because you're uneducated. But we're very smart, so you should believe us when we tell you it's safe, right? I've heard so many different variations on that same message in my time in nuclear, and it's rather embarrassing because people, and especially women, don't like to be talked to like this. It's certainly not very relatable. So contrast that with the picture of Heather on the slide here, and she's holding her daughter Zoe and speaking at a school board meeting. She's a motherly face, a caring local member of the community, and she's actually turned around talking to the audience now instead of talking to the school board, so she's relating with them. And she's not leading with nuclear. She's talking about what she cares about in the local school district, and then she's presenting herself and what she knows, and she has her credibility behind her. So that's been very effective. And here, this slide is meant to illustrate some of the examples of what we are trying not to do with Mothers for Nuclear. So some of the historical nuclear communications I've seen, have people, our beautiful women in nuclear, mothers and families in the background. And right out front, we lead with how safe nuclear is. Because it's so dangerous, we have these security guards and lots of razor wire and multiple trains of safety system components. And don't worry, we have fuel cladding and an RCS boundary and a containment before the bad stuff ever gets to you, and lots of scary signs, etc. So there's nothing to be afraid of. Well, how does that make you feel? I know that makes me just feel more scared, and it does the same to a lot of people. Yeah, this is sort of a defensive way to talk about nuclear, and it comes it comes so naturally to us, you know, because inside plants, we like to talk about how important safety is. But we have to put that conversation in context when we turn and face the public and try to see the conversation through their eyes. So the other day I was watching a movie with my son, Lego Movie 2, and hopefully all of you were fortunate enough to watch this movie. You should, because it's hilarious. But one of the characters in this movie illustrated this communication style perfectly. It's natural to go into a conversation knowing that nuclear has a bad rap and then start off by defending why we're not like what people say we are, right? And so this character in the movie, her song, which is again hilarious, said, here's some other adjectives people use to describe me: unduplicitous, unmalicious, unconniving, unnasty. And right, so then our hero says, you're just adding "un" to words that describe you. It's like, no, what? I'm the most least evil person you'll ever meet. This is, you know, in nuclear, we do this all the time. You're scared of nuclear? Oh, no, like here's all these reasons why we're so safe, why Chernobyl could never happen here. Don't worry about terrorists. We have robust security. So we end up talking about all these, you know, defensive, starting with a defensive posture instead of actually getting to the point where we're connecting with someone about an issue that they really care about. So I'm not saying here that we need to start blowing off people's concerns. Definitely not. But I'm saying that what we need to do is take a breath and step out of the frame that we think we're in before we firmly plant the conversation about nuclear in that kind of ugly space. And of course, every conversation is different. And I'm not proposing that this is a magic formula for advocacy, but just that we have to change our mindset when we turn to face the public with messages about nuclear. So what we're doing instead of this is trying to bring a personal touch forward and highlighting the beautiful people and the stories that we have to share. So speaking out for something you believe in can be intimidating, very intimidating, because there's always someone smarter than you out there. You're not necessarily going to have all the facts. You're going to say something wrong. And I would suggest that we just need to get over it and allow ourselves some room to be imperfect. And this is totally different than how we usually approach our jobs in nuclear, right? We're supposed to be perfect and not act until we have all of our questions answered, et cetera. But in advocacy, it's important to start. And something I'm encouraged about that someone told me when I started this was that, you know, there's one thing that you can never be wrong about, and that's your personal story and your personal why for why you're talking about nuclear. So we suggest that that's what you start with. Start with your why. Why do you support nuclear energy? Start with that and your personal story and let the facts follow. Women in nuclear are especially powerful if we allow ourselves to be human. And what I mean by that is not that we're not human, but a lot of times when we're working in nuclear, we're trying to be good parts of the machine. You know, we have in command and control of a nuclear station, there's a certain way we communicate, we talk in turn, we dress a certain way, et cetera. But in advocacy, it's okay and important to show off our diversity. So here's some of the things we've learned. As I said, get clear on your purpose. If you don't know why you're doing advocacy, it won't last long and it won't be very convincing. And second, find a friend. I don't think I'd still be doing this if it wasn't for Heather, because we've, as I said on one of the first slides, we got a lot of feedback when we started, some positive, some negative, and it's really hard to weather all of that feedback alone. So find someone that you can trust to bounce ideas off of and to be a source of encouragement for you. Also, the third one there in the middle, I put down here, I think specifically for US WIN and for us in the nuclear industry who are doing advocacy, we have to be careful to make sure we're building partnerships in the advocacy world instead of trying to build our own empires. There's a place for building organizations and framework and you know, building processes, et cetera. But when you're doing advocacy, it's best to focus on the stuff that matters and try to minimize all the bureaucracy that can come along with an organization, because those types of activities can sometimes make us competitive with one another, but advocacy is not competitive. It's a place where you can contribute, where you feel comfortable. It's a place where you can work with other advocacy groups and share what what works and what doesn't work. We do a lot of our advocacy with our local wind group, with Nuclear Matters, with Generation Atomic, and lots of others. And we try to be complementary with each other, not competitive. The next one is don't wait for perfection, jump in now. So public opinion as the foundation that policies and politics are based on is important. It really matters. Social media is an easy way to start. If you're ready to share your story, like we've done and like lots of other mothers have done, we have a blog space waiting for you. What I'm saying is there's lots of opportunities to contribute, and you don't need to be the best and the most perfect at it to start. You can start right now. And lastly, keep at it. It's easy to think you're not good enough, but you are the perfect person to reach someone like you. So that's all I have for you. I hope you feel empowered to do more advocacy in whatever outlet appeals to you. And as I said, we'd love to have you join us on our Mothers for Nuclear team, or we'd love to highlight your work if you're choosing a different outlet. So if anyone has questions or wants to follow up on something specific, I'd love to hear from you later. Thanks.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Kristen. Next up, we have Linda Barnhart.
Thanks, Katie. Just getting my slides up. And let's see here. All right, can everyone see my screen? Perfect. So first of all, thank you again for everyone for participating today. So I'm going to be covering my own presentation, which is going to be discussing how you can connect with your legislators online. But first, I'm covering for Christine Chimadia from NEI. She is unable to join us today as she is doing her civic duty, doing jury duty. So, you know, when they call, she has answered, and I will be covering her content of communications presentation. So much like Kristen was just talking about, one of the biggest things to keep in mind when you are talking with, you know, policymakers, legislators at the federal, state, community level is to share your own personal story. The reason why we ask people to do this is because you all are the experts, you're the most credible sources of this information about the industry for members. There's been several studies that have been done, including by the Congressional Management Foundation, that show basically how information coming into you know, the offices of elected officials is received and perceived. And basically what they have found is that those with credentials and degrees and expertise in a particular field are the most trustworthy sources of information. Ergo, if we want to educate our legislators about nuclear energy, you as the people who work in nuclear energy have the most authentic and credible voice to them. There's also additional research that obviously, as you know, members of Women in Nuclear, women are very much, you know, seen and respected as protectors of the community, leaders and families. And so that ends a little bit of additional credibility to your voice as you're speaking up. So basically you should feel more than empowered to advocate for what you believe in, to share your story with your legislator. They are open and willing to hear it. And that's really going to be how we make our point to, you know, to preserve and protect nuclear energy in our country. So on the screen right now, we have a few prompts, you know, to try to get, you know, the juices flowing. But really what we're trying to accomplish here is, you know, when you're telling your story is not only about you, but linking it to why nuclear. You know, as Kristen mentioned, it was her environmental, you know, passions that led her to, you know, help advocate for nuclear. And Kristen, I'm sorry if I butchered that one, but everyone has that inflection point, you know, that come to nuclear moment, and that's really what we want you to share when you are communicating with your elected officials. Part of this too is when you're, you know, tailoring your message, is knowing your audience. You know, not every elected official is the same. Obviously, there's two main political parties, but even within that, there's some people who lean more to the right or to the left within any given spectrum. So we want you to know how important it is to sort of, you know, not only understand what their background is going into it, but also just to listen. You know, when you're going into this meeting, you know, learn as much as what you can about what motivates them or what they've been thinking. That could be from their previous legislative record, or if they've said something publicly on an issue, or if they're a big advocate for clean energy or national security issues. Like, there's so many things that you can learn before you even start talking to help, you know, communicate your message even more effectively. Obviously, if you're meeting with an elected official, understanding what their party background is, but also learning a little bit more about their landscape. You know, do they have a plant in their district? Is this an issue they're familiar with? If you're a constituent in a district where there's not a plant, obviously they want to talk to you because they represent you. You have elected them. But, you know, being able to link that context back of there might not be a plant or a supplier or other member of the industry within your direct district, but I live here and this is important to me. Either way, if you're meeting with them, you are a constituent, you are important to them. They want to hear from you, but you might need to do a little bit more legwork if there's not that direct connection to make. Also, we have some messages listed on the screen, some general categories of some of the benefits of nuclear energy that tend to resonate better with different audiences. So for example, conservatives or Republicans tend to want to listen more to messages about economic impact, national security, and fuel diversity. You know, those are more, you know, right-leaning issues that tend to, you know, spark their interest a little bit more than, say, clean energy and the environment, which is much more a left-leaning Democratic issue. Obviously, there are, you know, members of either party that will listen to either of these messages, so doing that background research will help with that. But just as a general topic, you know, breakdown, those are some of the key inflection points for each of those different members. So now we can talk about advocating for nuclear energy. So a lot of the conversations, as you may be aware, happen online. You know, obviously, if you're meeting with people in person, that's sort of like the pinnacle. That is the best thing that you can do, is meet and talk with your legislators in person. However, there's ways to tailor your messages, make those personal connections, no matter how you're talking to people. So that's what we're going to dig into a little bit now. So first off, just a reminder, you know, why is it important to contact your legislator? Well, you know, really the industry needs your voice. You know, none of the advocacy work that Mothers for Nuclear, Women in Nuclear, Nuclear Matters is doing, you know, can happen without you and your voice. You know, obviously there's been a lot already happening this year. Green New Deal has sparked a number of conversations about the role of nuclear and clean energy. The Nuclear Energy Leadership Act was introduced to promote nuclear innovation, not only in the Senate, but just in the House yesterday. So there's so many things that are going on that, you know, we can really use your voice and your support to communicate those out to your elected officials. You know, and the choices we make today really just have a lasting impact. So if plants shut down tomorrow, that's it, we're done. And as Kristen mentioned, that usually gets replaced by fossil fuels. So the steps we take today really do matter. There's more stakeholders than you might think in this. It might not just be, you know, the people working at your company. It might also be the person who owns the restaurant down the street that you guys all go eat lunch at. It could be, you know, the family that has medical issues, that having that clean air is so important. So there's a number of different things to keep in mind about, you know, you're advocating for you, but you're also advocating for your community. And also, I think the best thing to keep in mind throughout all this is that your elected officials were elected, as I said earlier, were elected by you. You know, they are, you know, they represent you and your interests. And so everything we are doing and talking about right now is so important to remind them of why these issues are important to you and thus to them. So Nuclear Matters has a number of resources on our website, including some blog posts that have some tips and tricks for effective advocacy. We recently posted one about a month ago, right around the start of NEA, with some tips on how to be a great advocate, both online and offline. So really the pro tips are, I think, as we've iterated already, know your facts. You know, it's really hard to argue with factual information. I know that there's all these, you know, conversations and fake news is tossed about a lot, but if you have your talking points, if you have your statistics, that is the best way to be prepared, you know, to help support some of those topics that might be a little bit more controversial or harder to explain. Tell your story. I mean, that is the most authentic thing that you can do. As Kristen said, that's something that they found effective. The Nuclear Matters, you know, community of advocates always finds that effective. We share story cards on our social channels all the time. You know, whenever we go to plants or to companies and talk to people, those are the best parts of our visits, is hearing from others about why this is so important, why nuclear is important to them, what it's done for their community and whatnot. So that's sort of the real ticket. From there, it's making that connection. So it's whether you're, connecting with your member of Congress online, or you're talking to someone in person, or sending an email. It's, as Christine's slides mentioned, it's doing that little bit of legwork research to be like, okay, you've maybe covered these issues before, so we can, have a conversation about this because you've already got some familiarity here. Anyone who's answering your questions is a person too. So sharing that story, being personable and being open is a great way to establishing that connection and making sure that we're opening doors. Also then just making it real and building your network. Once you send an email, it doesn't stop there. You can share content on social media, you can participate in a Hill Day. Even then it's following up on those connections that you make, no matter how you make them. It's never quite a one and done situation. Even when we have people send action alerts through our Nuclear Matters site, which we'll show you later, that's a step, but that should not be there's more steps to take. You can continue to go beyond that, continue to follow up with your legislators. Like, you're just building that lasting connection. So that way, your legislator knows, hey, I've got these constituents in my district who really value this source of energy supply. So as I mentioned, email, social media, Hill Days, those are all effective ways to communicate with your legislators. I know Christine is going to talk about her participation in a town hall. We have found at Nuclear Matters that email is still one of the most effective and popular forms of communications with legislators. So it never hurts to, shoot them a quick email. As I mentioned, our Action Center, especially if we're activating around particular issues like, specific piece of legislation or Green New Deal or whatnot, our system will help populate a lot of those. But it's also easy enough to go online, find an email, and send one off yourself. As I mentioned earlier, social media is hugely popular. Legislators are increasingly on social media, following who's tweeting at them or commenting on their Facebook posts. So that's another great way to do some outreach on there. And I'm going to turn to that one next to talk a little bit more about that. So, these are where the conversations are. We, as Nuclear Matters, are all over Twitter and Facebook. If you have not followed us already, we highly encourage you to do so. We share great content, including stories, news articles, statistics, motion graphics, anything that we post, you are more than welcome and open to share. So for example, if you're trying to find something to share with your legislator, you can be like, hey, here's an interesting motion graphic about how nuclear energy works from Nuclear Matters, check it out. It's easy enough to retweet, share a post, so whatever we post is yours to, share around. Also, feel free to join conversations. Each platform really is different. Facebook is more for long form conversations. So if you want to write a post and share your personal story on there, that's the medium to go with. I would not put that on Twitter. Twitter is more short, snappy, sharing images or motion graphics, ways that when you're scrolling through the many tweets that are loading on your page, that something will catch your eye. I know anytime I'm scrolling through my Twitter feed, our motion graphics always catch my eye, and I always stop and check them out. So there's, knowing the differences between those two platforms will help you to be a more effective communicator on both of them. It's also, the biggest thing to keep in mind is, as you're telling your story, is to make sure you customize and tailor your posts. Even if you're sharing a statistic from Nuclear Matters or NEI or Women in Nuclear or anyone, you should add, some stuff around it. Like, why, this is a great stat, but why does that matter to you? Or why are you sharing that? So giving some additional context around that will only help to build the impact of what you are, spreading the word about. And then, as always, remain factual and action-oriented. Social media can be a little bit of a deep dive for people wanting to get into contentious conversations. Obviously, we are talking about nuclear energy, but Chernobyl has been a thing recently. There's obviously other nuclear in play around the world. So just make sure that you stay above the fray, remain consistent with your facts, and you should be good to go. But don't give in to the trolls is really our biggest pro tip. So lastly, this is just a screenshot of our Nuclear Matters Action Center. After the webinar, our team will be sending an action alert out to everyone who's participating on this webinar, so you can contact your legislators and say why you support nuclear energy. So that will come through this Action Center. If you haven't already signed up for Nuclear Matters website, again, I highly encourage you, just go to nuclearmatters.com/join, and then you will be signed up to receive our monthly newsletters, any action alerts that happen within your state or at the federal level, this is a great way that we help to do the legwork for you. So, you put in your zip code, we help to identify your legislators at both the federal and state level. If there's an issue at hand, so for example, we're recently promoting the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, so we have some information in there about the bill that can be sent out to your senators. We're working to get it up for the House of Representatives as well. But it's just, we take the legwork out, so that way all you have to do is input your information, customize the post a little bit, and send it out with the click of a button. So that is all that I have, and I will hand it over to Christina to talk about her experiences advocating in person.
Hey, Christina, make sure that you're unmuted. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great, perfect. All right, so let me share. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Ham, and as Katie mentioned, I'm a consulting engineer with NPR Associates in Virginia and the leading group member for DC Wind. I recently attended my first town hall meeting for the congressman of my district to talk to him about nuclear power a couple months ago, and I learned some tips that I'm going to share with you today. Also, I'm going to talk to you about a new fun advocating endeavor that I'm starting, and I'm looking for people to partner with me to make that happen. So I'll cover that near the end. So I know that not every district has opportunities to speak with their representatives in person. Some of their town hall meetings are online. But if you have the opportunity, please take it, because there are some pretty great benefits, like getting to talk to your representatives directly about how awesome and how necessary nuclear power is. One of the best parts is you can get a direct and immediate reply from the representatives instead of being emailed back with a cookie cutter reply that isn't even really relevant to what you contacted the rep about anyway. You also get an opportunity to advocate for nuclear in front of potentially over 100 politically minded and active constituents in your district. At the town hall I went to, at least 5 other people spoke and asked questions about what the representative was doing about climate change. And so it's good to remind people like that about nuclear power. Also, you can feel proud about just doing your duty as an American and an Earth dweller by trying to make the planet healthier. So once I signed up for the town hall, I realized the only notions I had about how this kind of meeting went were from the TV show Gilmore Girls. So I knew I needed to do some research. So while some parts of the town hall may vary, all of them follow the same general format. So first, the representative will start with an introduction, probably cover what he or she is working on, hot topics and policy, things like that. And then the representative will open it up for Q&A, and everyone who gets up to the mic will have 1 minute to talk and ask their question to the representative. In response, they'll get about a 3-minute or so reply from the representative, and so on and so forth until the end of the meeting, where the representative will wrap it all up. So that's pretty much it for how the meeting goes. I'm sure the intro time may vary and things like that. But here are some tips for actually getting to the microphone and getting to speak during the event. So you want to be in the front of the line, so get there early. You might even have to sign up to speak, perhaps even before the meeting. So in my case, there wasn't a sign-up list, but getting there early let me sit close to the mic and where the line started, and I was the second person to get to speak to the rep. Also, it's a good idea to speak at the beginning while the representative is fresh, and then more people are present to hear you. attendance will dwindle over the course of the meeting. Also, keep in mind, you want to get it all out in a minute or less. So it's generally considered rude to take too much longer. The representative and the staffers and the audience will start getting agitated if you take too long, which would make them less receptive to hearing your message and request. So just keep that in mind. The main takeaway is get there early so you actually get a chance to speak. Most likely not everyone will get to. But even if for some reason you don't, you can likely talk to the representative and the staffers after. You'll just miss on your opportunity to advocate in front of all those attendees. So some tips to prepare. Kind of goes without saying, determine what you'll say beforehand. So you'll want to talk about, you know, who you are and who you represent. So the tips that Linda covered in the previous slides would be totally great for this. You know, do your research, you know, share your story, right? And so you'll want to introduce yourself and say who you represent. So keep in mind the representative is trying to determine how many like-minded constituents you represent. So make it easy and tell them. You might say, for example, there are 200 people in my WIN chapter, things like that. And then your short story, why you're there, why you care. So benefits of nuclear, you want to give some data-backed evidence for your claims, right? There are lots of great resources like NEI and ANS and Nuclear Matters. They have, Nuclear Matters even has a little guide on how to go to a town hall, so you can check that out. And then make your case for why the representative needs to take action. And then go ahead and make your request or your call to action for the representative. And try to be specific if you can. You don't want the rep to just say, oh yeah, I like nuclear, but not say how specifically he or she is planning to support nuclear in policy making. Also, bring some people with you if you can. They'll give you encouragement. And again, the rep is trying to figure out how many people you each represent, right? And so if you have multiple people, probably makes more of an impact. So bring a handout. I wish I had done this. I think this would have made it more effective when I went. But I think bring a handout of your notes, your key points, and your contact information, and give it to the rep or the staffers as a takeaway so they have a hard copy to look over after your brief 1-minute speech. So since you're getting there early, go ahead and kill time and chat with the staffers about nuclear. They're just standing around anyway, most likely, and will be happy to discuss policy with you. And then after the meeting, send a follow-up email with the representative to reinforce that how much you care about this. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I was nervous that, you know, since I had never gone to a town hall before or spoken to a representative, much less asked one to do something for me, but it was pretty quick and painless. And in fact, I was actually applauded by the representative and the attendees for being a woman in nuclear. So who knows, you might even get a round of applause. So don't fear, you can do it too. Now, I mentioned at the beginning about a new advocacy scheme that I'm plotting. I call it the Radio Activist, which would be a YouTube channel full of short videos about nuclear. So they would be quick, entertaining, informative videos that would cover topics like basics of power generation, nuclear science, you know, benefits of nuclear for like climate change or jobs, you know, history about nuclear power in the US, major accidents, comparisons of generation types, how do carbon-free credits and taxes work, what the heck is advanced nuclear, and then probably most importantly, like, why should everyone care about the early shutdown of nuclear plants in the US. So the ultimate goal is to educate and inspire young voters to sign up for Nuclear Matters and take political action to help nuclear. So it's going to be a fairly big effort. So I'm looking for volunteers to help me out, particularly those who have time and those who have skills or want to develop skills in these areas here. So if this project sounds exciting to you and you want to get involved, please contact me. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Christina. And thank you to all of our speakers for their very insightful, thoughtful, and helpful presentations about advocacy and nuclear energy. So we're coming up on the hour here, but I want to make sure that our speakers have the opportunity to answer some of the questions that you all have posed. So thank you to those of you who have sent them to me and in the group. So we'll just jump right into those. First, I just want to address a couple questions from our friends at the Clinton Power Station. I know that there are a number of them on the call, so these questions come from them. The first is for Kristen, so if you could just please make sure you take yourself off mute. The question is there a point in advocacy when we are supposed to discuss the substantial arguments for nuclear energy? And is there a certain demographic that this argument works for, such as policymakers?
Not sure I understand the question necessarily. Is there a point when we're supposed to make arguments for nuclear energy? Yes. So what we usually do is start by talking about what we care about and connecting with that other person about, or that other group, let's say, if it's like in written or form or social media, et cetera. So we connect on an issue we both care about. Hey, we both care about climate change. And then we talk about how nuclear is good for that particular care that we both share. And we don't lead with the facts, but that's when we come in and provide facts if someone is interested. Not sure if I answered the question.
So you're saying that there's sort of more of a personal and emotional hook in getting them engaged in the conversation, and then you delve more into the sort of substantive, here's why nuclear is good piece of it.
Yeah, that's it. So we say sometimes start with heart and let the facts follow.
Got it. Great. And Linda, I think this next question is for you. During Nuclear Energy Assembly this month, NEI published a booklet called Nuclear Energy is Just the Facts. Can the information in that booklet or a version of that booklet be communicated to everyone on this webinar so they have access to it?
Yes, so actually that is an NEI publication, but I'm more than happy to reach to Christine and we can get that distributed to everyone. I know that they had hard copies at NEI, so I'm pretty sure they probably have an electronic copy as well. But yeah, it's a great resource. Thank you for asking about that. So we'll make sure to take that on as an action item and get that up to everyone.
Great, thank you. A couple other good questions came through in the chat, one from Peach Bottom specifically. Can you give an example of an action that we should request from our representatives if there isn't any bill to support yet?
Right, yeah. So when I went, I actually didn't have any particular bill that I was asking about, but you can also just ask, hey, what are you doing to support nuclear, right? Like put the question back on the representative.
Great. And Christina, you had mentioned during your town hall presentation that you only had a minute to talk about nuclear power. We all know that there are so many wonderful benefits of the generation source, but how did you choose which points to address in that 1 minute?
Yeah, that was actually a challenge. I started off with a much longer list, and then it was right there, like right before I spoke, they told me I only had a minute, so I had to really skim. But I basically, I kept it to, I want to make it clear who I am and why I care, you know, so make the story and tell the story. And then I tried to keep it to the most like poignant facts, like
I knew for Don Beyer, like climate change was a big deal. So I talked about how nuclear provides like over 50% of the carbon-free power in the country. And so I mentioned that, and then I talked about the Union of Concerned Scientists article about, they're predicting a third of the plants are going to shut down soon. So that would, definitely reduce the amount of clean power that nuclear is providing. So I basically just spoke about those. I was going to get into others, but those were my main points.
Great. It's great. And I think that is a good representation of what Kristen was saying too, by finding out what they care about and then talking about that thing.
Right, right.
So I'm just hopping around a couple other questions here. Kristen, you had mentioned that you're not a policy person or a politician. So how do you stay informed with the sort of legislative and political developments in the space, and in a way that, so that you can always be sure that your advocacy is at the right place and time?
Well, I guess, step one is admitting what I don't know. And so I reach out to others who are better informed in that space, like Nuclear Matters, or like my good friend Christine at NEI, who was supposed to be on the call. So I usually check with people who I respect in the policy space. And then if we want to, advocate something particular to a certain bill that's coming up or a certain proposal that was raised, then we take action after that.
Great, thanks. And thanks for the plug on Nuclear Matters. We do have a lot of resources. If anyone is ever unsure where to go, we certainly can help. Just two other quick questions here. Laura Schwartz is asking, there are over 4.4 million Americans that do not have congressional representation that can vote. Any thoughts on what they can do?
Well, Gary, as a DC resident myself, which was funny when I tried to participate in our action alert at NEA and was told I do not have any elected or do not have any senators, which I was aware of. I think there's, a lot of it is just educating our own communities. So by community, it's not just the community I live in, which is DC. There's no nuclear facilities in DC, but we receive nuclear energy from sources, in Maryland and Virginia. But it's also talking to people like my parents and my extended family about why it's so important. My parents actually live in Georgia, where it's been huge. And so being able to share the benefits of, nuclear energy with them, especially when there's been all those resolutions and everything that's been happening in that state, and just giving them the facts has helped to educate them so they can help educate others. So it's sort of like this ripple effect outwards. Also just being involved on social media. Like, I'm friends with people from across the country. I'm assuming many other people probably are. You might have relatives that live in other states or friends from college or whatnot. Just feel free to share content on there. Like, as long as we're helping to educate others, that's, such a great way to, we may not be able to reach policymakers ourselves, but we can definitely educate the public, who can then educate their policymakers. So it's really doing what we can aside from moving, which is not really an option at the moment, but, there's many different ways to stay involved.
Great, thanks, Linda. And I know that we're right up against the hour here. There's just one more question I want to make sure we ask. This is from Lily Robb at Comanche Peak. Some of us work for companies where nuclear is a small part of the company's overall energy portfolio. What advice can you guys give about advocating as an individual while being respectful of company policies?
Yeah, I can answer that. This is Kristen. Lily, that's a great question, and something that Heather and I thought about a lot before launching Mothers for Nuclear, because we launched it, and then like a month later, our company announced the planned shutdown of Diablo Canyon. So that put us in a really strange space. But what we've learned through that experience is, talk to your communications and HR team up front, especially if you're thinking about doing something more or expanded in the advocacy world. So we talked to our team, and we learned that it was okay for us to have a blog. And we just had to be clear that we weren't representatives of PG&E, but that we were speaking for ourselves. Now, we don't plaster that on every page, but we don't ever say something in PG&E's voice, et cetera. And if someone ever asks us, that's how we respond. We also got clear with what we could say as you know, as a company person and even as a WIN member, because WIN is sponsored by our company. So the events we do with WIN and we partner on in advocacy space are things that our company feels comfortable with. And then the things that we do more on our own time and in our own blog and in our own social media feed is stuff that that maybe our plant or our company isn't comfortable saying. Like, for example, after the announcement that we were going to shut down Diablo Canyon, they didn't want us to say that we should keep existing nuclear plants open. And so I felt like, well, either I stop advocacy or I have to find another way to say this. So I just got real comfortable doing advocacy on my own time. And then when we do advocacy events with WIN, that's when we usually partner on a school visit or something like that, where we're giving a company approved message. But if you are in that space where you have a company that has conflicting priorities, just know that you're not alone, because it happens all over the place. But definitely communicate early and often so that you're clear about what your company supports and what they don't support. And you can make sure that you respect that line. Also, we have meetings periodically with our senior leadership, our very senior leadership, just as a courtesy, you know, Heather and I do, to inform them of the things that we're doing. Sometimes we'll even run a presentation by them, et cetera. Because even if we're not speaking in their voice, you know, what we do reflects on nuclear, and Diablo Canyon is the nuclear power plant in the area. So we don't want them to be surprised. So we do that as a courtesy also.
And this is Linda from Nuclear Matters. I'll just add real quickly, we launched a program last year called the Nuclear Energy Ambassador Program. So we work with companies across the country to help people like yourselves who are interested in advocacy efforts and outreach. So really to help empower you guys, make sure you have the resources, but also working with your company leaders, you know, to make that possible, even if it is a small part of the portfolio. So if you guys haven't heard of it, you can check it out at nuclearmatters.com/ambassadors. We have information on the site, and if you're interested, you can sign up there.
Great. Thanks, Kristen.
All right.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks, Linda. We're right at the hour here. Thank you guys for letting Nuclear Matters participate. I'll pass it back over to Katie Saltzgiver from WIN to bring us home.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time today and for listening in. I hope everyone feels inspired and motivated to go and reach out to their representatives and make a difference in nuclear policy. So if you have any questions for any of our speakers, anything that wasn't, any questions that we didn't get to, they can all be reached by their emails. They're all listed here. And yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.